Hey everyone, welcome back. Been gone for a couple of weeks. I was over in Sydney, Australia, being hosted by Hamish from the Sydney Human Factors Research Lab and Group. They do some wonderful work, and it's prompted some gadgets to be made. Take a look in the Edu Science channel in the NEOS Discord. You'll see what we've been doing. The parts that led up to the Spider Island experiment, which I'll also go over in another sort of series of videos, are going to make some interesting videos. They're going to make some tutorials, and they're going to make some kind of gadget releases, and we're going to go over them as we come back. As there's kind of a backlog, as I was super busy doing science over there in Sydney, do bear with me. For today, we're going to go over a gadget which I made whilst I was there that helps with the science experiment. And it's called, I think I called it Teleporter Zones. I'm not really set on that name, it doesn't really matter. Let's hop into Smooth POV. I'll spawn it in from my public folder and I'll show you what it does. So, open up my public folder. Let me turn on Private UI again. Private UI here. And so in Private UI here, we've got utilities. Inside utilities, you'll find a couple of things. The two things we're going to be looking at today are this thing here, teleporter zones, and then the piece of logic that just is glued next to it. I don't really know what to put that in, so it's kind of just sort of a floaty piece of logic that I packed somewhere in the world. So we spawn this in first, and we'll spawn this in second, and we'll just chuck this to one side. I can talk about both in turn. So this here is a little gadget called Teleporter Zones, and you'll see here that there are actually two parts of UI. I'll make this clearer maybe in a source conversion. This was super hackily put together for the science experiment. So the bottom half, which starts with this text box and this black target, is where you can create new teleport zones. Here I have A specified, and I can pull A out, and I'll get an orange A. This color is randomized, but the name of the teleport location is there for you. And so if I come back here and I put in, say, let's go potato, and I pull it out, you'll see I've got the potato zone. So now if we go back here and I put in the username of me, so we can just do prob, has to be the start of the username, but it doesn't have to be the complete one, so we can just do prob for probable prime. And I'll say teleport to A, and I push the teleport button. I'm now standing on A. And I'm also facing A, and that's why there's an arrow on the front of it, so you can kind of rotate things around. This is based in a gadget that I believe Medra and Leon made for some other experiments or things that happened within NEOS. Let me just sort of see if I can dig up where they might have came from in my yeah, here they are. So came from these. These were their version, and in their version, the numbers 1 to 0 would they would allow you to teleport between 1 to 0 on these points, and you can just kind of move them around. I wasn't really satisfied with 1 to 0. An additional video from this one will be how Coffee and I spent hours optimizing this, not for any sort of malicious intent, but just to kind of learn how the logics work and then made it a bit better. And it's just an interesting topic to talk about, so that's for another video. But from that, we then adapted it to these to meet the needs even more, because these don't do rotation, and there's also only 10 or 8 of them. I forgot the exact number, so that's what those are from. So huge thanks to Medra and Leon for inspiring this, and then of course the Spider-Man experiment for requiring it, I guess. So I'm going to go over how this works, and then sort of talk about the ways you can use it beyond just this platform. So the first thing to note is that the teleport points are completely separate from each other. They don't require either this base or each other to talk to. That does mean there's duplication of logics, but I balanced that up against the number of points in a world. So there's only 2 points in the Spider-Man experiment, so it kind of worked out okay. And it also means that the logic is self-contained, which means you can kind of hook it into other things or call it a little bit more sort of verbosely without worrying about, talking to the master controller or something. So if you just imagine a line through the middle here where my hand is, the bottom half is completely separate from the top. The top is just basically a remote control. Over here is a piece of logic which kind of shows how to use it a little bit more effectively. This does two things. It does one because I haven't expanded it to do the other thing yet. So here, what we've got is basically the logic circuit that can trigger these teleport points based on keyboard input. So here, when I push A on my keyboard, it will, for a single frame, it will put A into this type delta variable. And we're then hooking that into fire on change for the local user, which means we get an impulse for every type delta, which is how many characters I can type in one frame. From that, we then call a dynamic impulse, which I went over in Twitch Part 3. I'll give you a link to that one. And it will send an impulse with the local user to that teleport zone, because the teleport zone responds to an impulse by its same name. So on here, there is a dynamic impulse receiver that receives a user, and it listens to A. And based on that, it will then teleport you in there. So if I find my keyboard in my real world for a second, this is somewhat challenging, but we'll try it. I also have to have Neos focused, so make sure it's focused when you use these keyboard shortcuts. My OBS was focused when I did this. So tab back to Neos, select Neos, find A again, which is surprisingly difficult. I think that's it. Yep, that's it. And you'll see now that we're teleported straight over to A. So you can do this with any keyboard key. All the keyboard keys work. Some might be reserved, but basically you've got like 26 letters in the whole number row. Like you're not going to run out of most. It just has to fit in this type delta. So just to go over that again, type delta will contain the single frame of typing that occurs from a local user's keyboard, and then we plumb that into a dynamic impulse, which is listening for that type delta. So if you type A, it says A, and then that does an impulse for A, and then A picks up and goes, yep, I'm putting you over there. The reason why this takes a user, though, is that if we wanted to do something within, say, our experiment logic or somewhere else within our piece of work, what we could do here is just call this manually. So what I can do here is, I'll need the root slot as well. Always call these on the root slot. It's usually not advisable to do that, but for here it makes kind of sense. So here what I can do is I can say A, and then I can put the local user in here, and now these things are completely separate, and this will basically always teleport the local user to A. This doesn't have to be the local user, it could also be a user from username or a active user or anything like that. You can use it pretty much for anything here, and that's why that takes a user. Otherwise, we'd just rely on local user. You can override that with any user. So you might have, in an experiment, so it's just going to show a fully worked out part of this, you might have, for example, like another dynamic impulse, which says to the root slot, that wouldn't be a value. Say, for example, you had another dynamic impulse to the entire root slot, and you said reset, reset. By the way, I am secondary clicking briefly on the node to change the node type. That's a change that Coffee implemented as far as I'm aware, or at least we requested it. Makes it super fast to kind of clone logic setup. So here I just secondary push just momentarily, and I get the node I'm looking at here. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying to the root slot, yo, reset everything and then teleport me to A. And so another device or operation or thing, for example, in Spider Island, the Tupperware container responds to reset here so that it knows to put the lid back on and make sure it's stationary where it should be. So reset and then tell me into A. Reset and I'm on A. Perfect setup. You can take this kind of one step further here by if you just take a regular dynamic impulse and you throw in the same properties, which I usually did like this, I think. Then it means that this one will basically hook the entire keyboard up to this kind of system. So here you might have, or in Spider-Man, for example, we have X will clear the data feed. So X comes through here as type delta, gets fired here with a user first. There's no teleport point for X, so it's fine. It goes through, and then it says X is a regular dynamic impulse, which will then clear the data flow. You could also throw a sequence there if you didn't want to do both, or you wanted to do both at the same time. But this kind of runs a lot of experiments. It's going to be super cool. So you can kind of, you can trigger stuff based on the user that did it, based on the keyboard. You can also trigger stuff globally, anything you want really, like X for delete. We have 1 to 6 are like conditions within our experiment. 9 and 0 are start and stop data. X is clear the data. R puts it to like a reset kind of state, resets everything completely. Hope that makes sense. You can find it in my public folder. It's super useful. The other thing here that you should do, and a quick note as well, is to pull open one of these. Don't pull open this platform, pull out one, and then pull open the logix on this. You'll see some tricks there that were employed, and I'm happy to go over them in a slightly different video. Huge thanks again, Coffee, to for doing those. He did a lot of the vector math and also the quaternarian math to kind of get us aligned up. Thanks to Coffee as well. I think it was Coffee who did the 3D model here. I edited it so it had the arrow going forwards. And again, thanks to Leon and Medra for inspiring this gadget using their original 0 to 9 colored dots. These ones just allow you to be, I guess, infinitely more flexible. So I think I mentioned here resetting. So when I push 1 in Spider Island, it says reset everything, teleport the user to zone 1, which is the teleport zone in Spider Island, and then facing the right way. The Tupperware container is all done, and it's pretty much all driven by basically this collection of logix nodes. So it's a super useful gadget. I will see you next time with another Spider Island themed gadget, and we'll do a Spider Island kind of overview at some point as well. Hope this is beneficial. If you're ever looking to teleport people, this is how I do it dynamically. There are also components for this. I'll go over those in another video. They can be simpler if you're doing a kind of sort of doorway teleporter. I will see you next time.